you used React Server components, and have you used React Server components with React Native? If not, then this video is exactly for you, because in this video I will walk you through everything that you need to know to build and deploy your first RSC with React Native. If you're new to this channel, I'm Simon from galaxies.dev, where I have courses for everyone learning React Native. And in this video, we will go from the basics of setting up your React Native project, creating an RSC, and also how you can actually deploy this, because with Expo SDK 53, you can now also deploy your RSCs and use them in production. So let's dive into this. I've already started a blank new application and I cleaned out my folder with bun or npm run reset project. So you only end up with like a layout file and an index file in your project and the rest. Now, to get started with RSCs, you need to install a specific package, at least at the time recording this, of the React Server DOM Webpack package. And also, this version is for Expo SDK 53 and above. If you're below that, you actually need this other one with a specific, RC. Then you also want to enable the React Server functions in your app.json. So head over to the app.json and you want to go down to experiments, add React Server functions true. Now, I also want to set my output here to single. As far as I know, this is required, or at least that is what the documentation says. Besides that, ensure the origin is false. This shouldn't be any problem in a default application. So here's an example of a React Server function. We can just copy this over. Let's create a new folder, call this one actions, and then I will add a new file under actions and call this render info.tsx. Just quickly seeing, this is pretty much the basic of a React Server component. We have use server at the top, the directive that marks this file to use the streaming protocol and streams back a server component. As you can see, we're using text from React Native, and in this file I could securely fetch data from an API, read environment variables and whatnot. So now I could just use this, and let's just copy and follow this example here, because then we have a quick example and see how it works. I'm gonna paste this here in my index. I actually think I don't need to reference these types anymore. So we do have a suspense block here. So this will render an activity indicator while our application is still loading. And once it's done, it will use render info, our action here, and the name world. So let's just deploy this right now. Bunix Expo. I will just use Expo Go for the moment. Use port something else instead. That's fine for me. Let's open this up on iOS. Here is the iOS simulator. I can also place this here, and then we can continue. Let's make this a bit smaller. And if you use this in default, the CLI here, the Expo CLI, will host your RSC, will take care of everything. So when our application now loads, it displays the activity indicator. You see the RSC is now bundled here in the background, and then we see the log hello world. I could of course change this to hello Simon, and then we would see hello Simon. So this would be your first RSC. This is actually a server action. I'm talking more about this in our new Galaxies course about everything Expo Router version 5, also authentication flows, API functions, everything, all of that. But for the moment, let's focus on RSC. What we want to do now is we want to build something a bit more useful and then deploy this. So let's see. We could, for example, use the movie DB. So I've been using this before. Evan also used this in one of his examples. It's a pretty nice API, and you can just sign up to get an API key. And I recommend you do this and place this as TMDB API key in your env. So let me bring in my env, and I'm gonna add this as a key like this. If you add it like this, you will also notice that there's no Expo public in front of it, which means this will not end up in your front-end bundle. This will stay secured simply in our RSC. I've also added a second env variable called Expo unstable deploy server. Evan told me that I should add this, and I think it does something that I will tell you in the end. I'm not sure if we need it, but I think it can't hurt to have it in there. So place those keys in a .env file in your project, and then let's create our own server function, or as I would like to call it, an RSC. Here we go. I will call my one movie list.tsx. So as far as I know, RSC is pretty much just the protocol that allows us to stream back something from a server function in form of views, text, elements, like we want to do. We put use server in the top, and let's snooze this for 50 minutes, which marks it as a file that exports a server function. I will also import the server only module. This makes sure that this file absolutely is only executed on the server and never ends up in the front end. Now, what we need is my API key, so I can grab this from my process, and I can also set the API URL to this endpoint. So you can just look this up, you can use anything you want, but that one is pretty cool. You can get to the API reference and then like something discover, I think under discover movie, and this is the one I used, right? Discover movie. Yeah, that's the endpoint. So that endpoint in theory should give me a result. I will try it here, and you can see it gives back this code here. Actually, based on this, I should be able to like make a type out of this. If I say like JSON to right, API response, and this is a movie, I guess. Okay, this is totally optional. I just wanted to do this to give you some like type information and you see what's going on. Now let's actually export the function. So export async function movie list. This is our RSC. And we can just make, first of all, a call to get those movies. So we're gonna await fetch my API URL. And we also, for that API URL, need to pass in my key. So for the headers, I would have to set authorization, and then we can do BIRA and my actual API key. Remember, all of this runs in the server, so there's we don't need to worry about anything in here. That's pretty cool. And this can be closed. And then I feel like I missed something in here, but nonetheless, well, let's just continue with our thought. We gotta convert this. Okay, where did I go wrong? We have fetch with the API URL. We have headers. This expression is now, oh yeah, here it does need to be no semicolon. Okay, perfect. So now we're getting these movies. This should actually be an API response. We can strongly type this. And now the fun begins. We can return something. So you could just return whatever you want, but I want to return a scroll view from React Native, of course. I actually think you can't return a flat list right here because it has a render item function, and then you get into a problem with that function. So that's why I was using a scroll view. And then we can say movies.results.map, and I will go through every movie element here. And for every movie, I want to return, let's say we just return a text for the moment. Okay. So a text and then movie dot, I don't know, title. All right, let's give this a try. We need to import text, of course, as well. So let's add text up here. And then our first RSC is ready. Let's put this to the test. We go back to our index page, and instead of calling render info in here, I will now replace this and use my movie list. Now you need to be careful. You always need to call this with a constructor. This is still how it works right now. It looks a bit ugly, but maybe this changes in the future. And boom, instantly we see the list of movies. And this code is now executed in a safe environment. It is not part of the bundle of my app, so I don't have to worry about this. There's no expo public in front of my key, so I can use any kind of secret key in there. And I can now just go about this and like do everything I want. So we can wrap this whole thing here with a view, and we have the text maybe. Oh, we have no view yet. So let's add a view. Oh, forgot to get this one. Okay, got a view here. And then we maybe want to add an image from React Native as well. So we can set the source of that image to, that one's actually a bit more challenging. Let me just copy that over because the item might have a poster path. Let's call this the movie. Or we might have to use something like an image base URL if that exists. So that one could look like this. I will tell you more about this in a second. So this does not have a size yet. So let's give it, I don't know, width of 50 and a height of 50 as well. And then we're going to see, oh, nice. We're starting to get all these results and we're building out our component here. And this is pretty cool. But at some point, you might want to do more. You want to have some sort of interaction, some more functionality included. Or, for example, you want to use the style sheet API to style everything. This usually doesn't work well. There are limitations of RSCs. You can do a lot. You can also do like full authentication flows and stuff with Stripe and pretty wild things. But at some point, you're gonna hit a limit. Let's try just use say const styles equals style sheet style sheet. Oh, why? It's so annoying if you turn off like this auto stuff. I forget that cursor is doing all of this for me usually. So style sheet create something something. Okay. Cannot access style sheet create on the server. You cannot dot into a client module from a server component. You can only pass the imported name through. So there are many more cases like this where you will encounter a problem that I've hit a limit and maybe RSCs are bad and this stuff is just not working. But there's actually a way out. Just like we have use server, there's also a directive called use client that you can use to mark components as client components. Let me show you how this could work. So under components, we might have a fictional movie component. So I created this before and I added use client up here. Let's comment this out for the moment. This one has pretty much what I wanted to do. So it has an image base URL. It is a touchable opacity. It actually has a link about that we're gonna have to talk in a second, and then it renders some information here. Nothing wild. It also has some styling down here. So just a general React component. You could build this out if you wanted to, but you don't really have to. Now I can go back to my movie list here and change my logic a bit. So instead of creating the view and style sheet and getting into all kinds of trouble here, I can instead use my movie card because the important part was doing this here in a safe environment in the server where I can grab my API key securely and I got the data. So now I can actually render my movie card. I can use like movie.id and I will pass in my movie as the item for the movie card. I also don't need the base URL anymore. And let's hit save. So what am I getting? I still get cannot access style sheet because right now, without any further additional directives or markup, React or React Native would think that this is also part of our server bundle because I'm using it here in the server function of movie list and I'm exporting it here. Now, import or enter the use client directive telling that this is actually a client component. This might freak out my app, so let's reel out here. And it's loading and voila. Now I see my beautiful movie cards just like I envisioned them. I want to style this a bit cooler. So this app, Evan told me whenever I make a demo of something with RSCs, it should look good. So Evan, here we go. I update my layout here to have some more styling and colors. And then in my index file, I will also change the background color. So here we go, wrap this with a view. I miss cursor so much when I'm turning this off. It's doing so much. How can you all live without this anymore, honestly? You gotta just like, you do this by hand anymore? Anyone, please tell me you're not doing this. Let's add some styling here to the view. Oh, view is not coming from React, I'm so sorry. View is of course coming from a package that could add this automatically. So Here is it. Looks so much better, right? We got this, we got the movie list, which loads RSC on the server, our movies, and then it renders the movie cards, which are now client components. I can also click on them in the client component and it takes me to a details page. I haven't edited this, but you could just have one of these files. So I have ID in the name and I render it. And if we check out the movie component, once again, you're gonna see that it just links to /item ID. So now going here, we would be on the details page for a specific movie and I could render the details on that page. And all of this just works. Maybe I could add some padding here and there. So I could now simply go back into my movie list in the scroll view, and in there I can say, oh, maybe this scroll view should have some padding here and there. That should look nicey. Yeah, so now we have some padding. And the great thing is that this could actually be updated now in the background, at least this part, even if our application is deployed. And speaking of deployment, that takes us to the next level, because as I said, right now, all of this is running with a local CLI, but you definitely want to test this out in a real project. So the first step to deploying our RSCs and testing this in a real environment is to run the expo export command. It doesn't matter if you use bunix or npx or whatnot, just run expo export. And don't run export-p web. That is a big problem. I did this before, and you notice that when you run the export command, you get a new dist folder in your application right here. That dist folder has the bundle of the RSC and also API routes or whatever, or the web information. But if you do it with platform web, you're gonna see that under, I think, client or under server. No, I think under client expo static JS, you would only have the web folder, but you also need the iOS and Android folder to actually make this work. Now, there are multiple ways from here to continue. You can actually run this locally. There's a new command with SDK 53 that is called run something. Oh yeah, looking for run in here is a great thing, Simon. Yeah, that is a great idea. Expo run? No, that is still expo run. Well, you can export and then run it locally, but that's still not helping you really out. Like, you want your friends to use your app, or you want to use test flight or whatever. So the next usual step is to run EAS deploy. With EAS deploy, it is still in preview, but that's fine. So I don't have an EAS project yet. I will set this up now automatically. So it's creating a new project for me. It's linking this to my ID, choose a new whatever. Yeah, that's fine. It creates the deployment, and then it's uploading my assets. So right here is my Expo dashboard. I should be able to see this. And I have my first deployment. I can also just promote this to prod by running EAS deploy prod. Just do this. Kids don't do this at home. You probably want to do this at a later point. Now, what we want to do now is tell our application that when we build this, when we use pre-build or something like that, a release configuration, it should use the correct endpoint, which is now this URL here of my hosting. So the real endpoint for production is RSC video.expo.app, which, by the way, on the web automatically works, as you can see. Like, I'm still blown away. I really love Expo EAS hosting. Anyway, you want to use this as your base URL, and there are two ways to do this. One is automatic, and I think what we've set up in our env file in the beginning, Expo Unstable Deploy Server, is doing exactly this. If you build your app with EAS, it will automatically inject the right URL or the base URL to your RSC and to your hosted API routes in your bundle. But if you used local pre-build, which I usually use, so something like bunix, Expo, run iOS. Now, I locally want to run this and test this against my real endpoint. In that case, what you can do is you can go to your app.json, and under Expo router, you can set a specific origin for all calls. You might have seen this in previous videos where we've used API routes. There, this is also usually done. So you can set the origin here. And I would now set my origin to the value of our URL. So that was RSC video expo app. Now I can build my application, and I can build this actually with a command like this. So I can use expo no deploy to make sure that I'm not deploying this to EAS hosting again. Then run bunix expo run iOS, as I said. So this is the second part. And by doing configuration release, I make sure that I actually create a standalone application of this. So I can now run this, remove my colors. That would make a pre-build. It would now use this origin, hopefully. If you've done a pre-build before, you might have to do a clean pre-build. So wipe out your iOS and Android folder, remove them, and then do another pre-build or run this command, which does a pre-build in the beginning. And then we can run this on a device. And I actually did this for a previous app while testing this. So this will spin up the bundler, and that might take a minute. So let's check when this is finished. You can, by the way, also see that in the beginning, it actually made the same stuff like we did when we ran the export. But then it says skipping server deployment because environment variable expo no deploy is set. That's why I had this in the beginning of my command. Just again, this is the command I used. You can, of course, also use this for Android. Maybe for Android, it's variant, not configuration. I haven't tested this. Make sure to check that out. All right, to skip the build process, I made this a bit faster. I'm using the app I had yesterday already deployed. Looks slightly different. I might have used a little, actually it looks a lot better. So Evan, this is the app I wanted to build. And in this application, once again, same logic. It is using the expo router origin set to my endpoint here. And you can see right now it's June 6th. So let's kill this one and let's start it again. We had one request on June 6th. If I reload this list, we should see that, yeah, it's cached, it's cached, it's cached. Oh my, there should be two. Actually, I just made one request and then there was a new one, and I wanted to show you how instantly this updates. Of course, this is not working when I want to show it. Here we go. Now we do finally have two of those. So much better. And why is it not my color has changed? That makes me sad. Anyway, this means that if you set the origin manually to that endpoint like we did in our app.json, or if you use the env variable with the expo deploy server and you use EAS to build, EAS will inject the right endpoint here for expo router in your application, which then results in your application that is deployed to actually make a request to the EAS hosted version. So this is not tied to the CLI anymore. This is a live and hosted RSC with EAS hosting. And that we've done this so casually that all of this just works, that we write the code, that we test it locally, that we deploy it with the CLI, and that we can host it and just exchange with the config plugin the origin, and then it works with the production environment, is absolutely mind-blowing to me. Just thinking about the technology that is involved in the background to make all of these different steps possible in the first place is so freaking cool. I'm still blown away by how well this already works at this point. It is still in sort of a beta, but you can use it today. With Expo SDK 53, Expo has announced that RSC and hosting with EAS is now possible. It is still in beta, but it is ready for production. And you can use this for things like having your Stripe keys, having any kind of sensitive keys that shouldn't be exposed in your front-end application, and for many more use cases in the future. Let me know in the comments if you tried this out, if you're now also fallen in love with RSC. I'm definitely into this. If you want to see more, if you want to see a bigger example, something with authentication with Stripe or anything else, let me know in the comments and I will definitely jump into this. And also check out the new Expo Router version 5 course on galaxies.dev, which has more information about RSC, API routes, and also authentication flows in your application. If you're not yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button and like this video so I can create more of this in the future, and I will hopefully catch you in the next one. So until then, happy coding, Simon.